It's time for Cutting Edge Consciousness with Freeman Michaels and Barnett Bain. Thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And we are back on Cutting Edge Consciousness. This is Barnett Bain with Freeman Michaels and our guest Bettie Spruill, calling in from North Carolina.
Got that right.
I did get that right, didn't I?
Beautifully done.
I've been studying. I'm taking notes. So before we broke, Bettie, we were talking about the distinction between feeling that one has to earn a living and struggle for a living, and the what happens when you cross that bridge of belief. And on the far shore, there is an entirely different reframing. We understand that we are already living, that it is a gift, and that when we're dialed into what can we give more so than what we can get, we are supported by all that is. Life kind of happens to us, but it requires a reframing, and that can be scary. So what can you offer our listeners to that?
Yes, well, number one is to be mindful. This is a great term I like, mindful. That as the observers, as the interpreters of life, we are, in the moment of interpreting, generating, bringing forth, or creating that life.
Mm.
That as we look at it, nothing is objective, you're saying. It is all subjective. We are assessing our world, and we are making it meaningful, and that is per every individual.
And the lens is our unique lens that has, it's important, at least for me, to know even some of the ways that my own perception may distort or shift that which I'm looking at.
Yes, and that's what the quantum physics people say. That as you observe, you're shaping. And we've gotten away from that in this whole notion of the notion of duality. It looks as if something is coming towards me, like the world, versus it's coming from me through my lens, my interpretations, my meanings. And so one of the first steps is to become aware and begin to become the kind of observer that can observe yourself observing.
Fabulous.
And in the moment of observation, see what shows up. And then it's like the Buddha, which is one of my taglines, turning arrows into flowers. As he was sitting and meditating one day, it looked as if all these arrows were coming towards him. And when he got there, were coming from him via his consciousness. The arrows turned into flowers and fell at his feet.
That's a heck of a conscious reframe right there. Because we were talking about reframing so that we can see things from a different perspective. That's a tremendous reframe.
That's an understanding of all of the calibration tools that we have used to filter everything that's incoming. Yeah. Our beliefs and our thoughts and our choices and our decisions and our attitudes and our feelings. And what would you add to that, Bettie?
Yes, and what I do is I ask people, not like this is the truth, but like a way of interpreting the world, is that you begin to see yourself as the author of everything in your life, and that there are no accidents, and that, in fact, the only thing that could be in your life is what's there because you, as a particular character in your narrative, can only have that. And so instead of trying to change all the characters in your life or the circumstances and the conditions in your life, you become like a great author, Macbeth, let's say. Macbeth had many, many characters. And there were certain themes throughout most of his work, especially the tragedies. And when we can start to observe and notice the narratives of our own life, we can see that we are, in fact, authoring the circumstances, the conditions, our reactions, our beliefs, and all of it. And that as the author, I'm not re-authoring because it's trying to fix something, but every moment I'm authoring life.
It's beautiful.
And with that, it takes rigor and discipline, which most people don't have.
People get caught up. They get reactive. I mean, what you're saying.
Well, there's also. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I have this image as I hear you speaking. I have this image of waking up in the morning and staggering into the bathroom and looking into the mirror and seeing this guy there and saying, "God, who put that guy there?"
Yeah, that's right.
And getting angry at the mirror.
Yes.
And there's also the element of the many me's and these characters that are within me and these storylines that I've played out. I mean, the storylines are patterned, at least in my experience they are. And so I can, at this moment in my life, as I start to go down a particular storyline, a particular narrative, as you're saying, I'm aware. I know the outcome, right? I know this dance well.
You're familiar with your trails.
That's right.
With your habits.
So there's an opportunity there, again, with this observer to go, wow, do I really want to play that out? And I think what we're talking about is then we've dimensionalized it to where there's other opportunities to, let's say, choose a different trail or a different path.
So I have a question for you, Betty.
Yeah, but the only way you can choose a different path is to own that you're the author of every path.
I love it.
You see, then once I'm the author, there comes with it a certain set of peace, serenity, and a kind of commitment to stay present and awake to what I'm authoring. But the moment I become a victim of anything, then I'm saying that something external to me is authoring my life. And that's me authoring something else authoring my life.
Yeah. And that's a bumpy ride.
It is.
So what is it? Well, let me reframe this question. When someone takes full authority for their lives and absolutely lives into the ownership of that, I am the author of the whole thing. At that moment, there is an experience of it's such a risk. There is such a risk because now we either go back to what was, or we go blindly into what will be. Yes, supported by what can I give and what can I bring to it out of who I am, but there's still enough of these trailing bits of who I was that assesses it from a perspective of risk. So what is it about risk, Betty, that is so exhilarating?
What's great about risk is innovation.
Mm.
Without risk, there's no innovation.
Yeah.
And it's in the moment, the risk, those parts of our lives where we experience frustration, any kind of frustration, that's where the juice is. Mm-hmm. That's where the power is, to learn to be with frustration, to learn to be with disappointment. Because all disappointment is an assessment that we make. There's no such thing called disappointment anywhere. It's how I'm interpreting the world that would have me assess it as disappointing. The same thing, I interpret the world in such a way that would have me assess it as successful. But we want to take those moments of risk and frustration and be aware and experience it fully. Because as we know, once you experience something fully, it disappears. And what's left is a clearing or space where I, the author, can now declare and act on my authorship. Authority, I like the word that you use, Barnett, authority. Because authority and authenticity and authorship, all those words play in together in a nice way, where I become the generator, the source of life, again, in a way that some days, with my own life personally. I'm here with my mother, who's 93 years old, and we were out shopping this morning, and I wanted to grab her and say, let's go, it's hot out here, let's just go, I'm so hot. And I stopped and could, be with her, 93-year-old woman, out here moving through the heat, trying to get a pair of pants that she can wear on Saturday to a party we're going to. And in that moment, I felt such peace and connection that I just slowed down and said to myself, I didn't say it to her, but whatever you need and whatever you want this day, I'm giving to you.
That's beautiful.
And we got through it, but it's that kind of awareness in terms of connection and interconnection. And I don't know Barry, but Barnett, I'll say this about you, which is one of the reasons I wanted to speak with you today. You've extended that to me ever since I met you, which is a kind of seeing, a kind of, it's like I see you, I'm here. And I find that the more I can be present to presence itself, opportunities show up, big ones, small ones. But I'm not out trying to grab something. I'm present to what's needed, what's wanted right here in this moment. And then I can begin to design a future from the future versus trying to design something to have something that I already have.
Yeah, that perspective is more reliable than the perspective that things ought to be a certain way. And I think one of the things, this is Freeman speaking, by the way, and one of the things one of the parts of this, moving back into the business framework, is that innovation is part of business today. And companies that can't innovate in this very fast-changing world are going to be in trouble. So, from an individual standpoint, looking at what does it take to be able to handle and respond versus react to whatever is, in essence, seemingly coming at us, there's an element of being able to be with discomfort. There's an element of risk, of being really even excited, let's say, about uncertainty. And then there's tools. There's a certain sense of character and maybe even values that we can rely on in terms of responding, again, versus reacting to what's coming up or seemingly coming up in our experience.
I want to jump in here because before we have only a limited amount of time, and so I'll say before we go any further that we want you to come back here, Betty, and next time in studio, so we have you here with us. But what you're speaking to in large measure is authorship, claiming the authorship of one's own life and what happens then. And you've alluded to this, not in this language, but you've alluded to what happens then as you begin to live into your destiny. But it is a destiny claimed that is self-chosen. And you will be in Southern California very soon, presenting a program called Living in Mastery that addresses many of these topics and more. And I want you to speak a little bit about that. And I also want to talk about our mutual good, beautiful friend, Ray Blanchard, and Spectrum.
Okay. Again, well, Living in Mastery is a course I've been doing all over the world for the past 25 years. And what it's designed to do is to have people begin to experience themselves as the author of life versus someone that life is happening to. And we have processes. It's experiential, it's engaging, it's involved. And 5 principles, if I can say them real quickly, is to experience my experience, which has to do with being present. It has to do with communication, because we're constituted by the language we live in. And we begin to design and develop language that brings forth the world versus language that speaks as if the world is happening to us.
That's a fantastic distinction.
And then the third part is a willingness to be responsible for everything, meaning, and we distinguish responsibility from obligation, because obligation produces a certain mood. But what is responsibility?
So you're talking about being able to have the tools to respond to the challenges of life.
Yes, and that has to do with how you identify yourself. See, as soon as you identify yourself as the author, then you can begin to look at life in a way, and also a deeper understanding of some of the higher, I call them higher truths or universal laws. So we study those. We play around with them. Mm-hmm. So there's not just some new age, nothing against new age, but new age thinking.
It's now age.
Some perennial thought that goes all the way back to the very beginning of, what it is to think, what it is to create. And then we ask people to develop principles. You talk about values. What are the principles by which I'll live my life? And where's my own integrity in living a life worth living? And what is it that I will never sell out on? Because the moment I sell out and have no integrity, the world becomes a complete and total mess.
So what are the lines that I will and will not cross? And this, we only have 1 minute left on the broadcast. I want people to know where they can find out more about Bettie Spruill and Living in Mastery, the website, and then also I want to talk a little bit about our good friend Ray Blanchard and Spectrum.
Okay. Well, they can find out more about this particular course at 323-434-3429. And Maggie is the woman who's sponsoring me down there in Southern California. So
you can also find out more about this on our Facebook page, people.
We'll put this on.
We will put this up on our Facebook page.
Yes, and my Facebook page as well, Bettie J. Spruill. Okay, and then Ray Blanchard.
Oh, I love Ray. Hey, Ray, if you're listening, get in here and say hello to us.
And Ray also has courses or a company down there in Southern California called Spectrum Life Design.
www.spectrumlifedesign, isn't that it?
That's it, yeah.
www.spectrumlifedesign.com. I can personally attest to the gift and genius of Ray Blanchard. So I urge all of our listeners to check that out. Do yourselves a favor.
All right, and with that, we have to take a break, but Barnett and I will be back.
We're going to talk about Betty behind her back.
Will.
I noticed we were not invited to the party. I'm just saying.
No, I want you to know you were invited. You have the date. I told you May 31st.
To the party with your mom.
Oh, the party with my mom. Come on. I'm in here cooking some coffee.
We went out. We bought pants. I didn't get I'm just saying. I just don't think I forgot that.
With that, Betty, thank you so much for spending the time with us today.
Love you, Betty.
Okay,
and for those of you listening, stay tuned. We'll be right back here on Cutting Edge Consciousness.